The millionaire CEO stopped for coffee, and saw three little girls sharing one muffin with birthday hats on their heads. He didn't know why, but something in his chest cracked open. Jason Carter never intended to stop at that cafe. His mornings were usually defined by perfectly timed routines, chauffeur drives, and coffee prepared by his assistant exactly the way he liked it, strong, hot, with a splash of almond milk. But that morning, something broke the pattern. His driver was stuck in traffic, his assistant was late responding, and Jason found himself walking a few city blocks on foot, something he hadn't done in years. The cafe was modest, nothing special, tucked between a laundromat and a bookstore. It wasn't the kind of place he'd normally choose, but he needed caffeine and it was open. He stepped inside, already mentally sorting through a list of emails and meetings, barely registering the warm scent of cinnamon and coffee beans that greeted him. As he waited in line, tapping his phone impatiently, a burst of giggles pulled his attention away. At a table in the corner, three little girls sat wearing colorful paper birthday hats. They were identical, clearly triplets, with dark brown hair tied back into matching ponytails and bright blue eyes that seemed to light up even the quiet corners of the cafe. On their table sat a single blueberry muffin, cut neatly into 3 equal parts. A half-empty bottle of water stood beside it, and one of the girls carefully placed a plastic straw into a cup with great ceremony. Jason blinked. There was something oddly magnetic about them, something that pulled his attention even when his mind tried to refocus. Then he heard the waitress's voice, gentle but apologetic. "I'm sorry, girls, but unless you have a few more dollars, I can't bring out the cake. Maybe next time, okay?" The girls smiled up at her, not arguing, not upset. One of them leaned forward and said, almost cheerfully, "That's okay. We'll blow out invisible candles. We're really good at pretending." Jason's heart gave a strange twist, like someone had taken a fist to his chest and squeezed. He didn't usually get involved in strangers' lives. He was known for his discipline, his cold logic, and his refusal to entertain emotional distractions. But his feet were already moving before he could think it through. He approached their table, and all three girls turned toward him with identical curious expressions. "Excuse me," he said, his voice softer than he intended, "is it your birthday today?" One of the girls nodded enthusiastically. "It's all our birthday. We're 7. We're triplets." Another added proudly, "We're best friends too." The third just smiled, eyes wide, clearly waiting to see what would happen next. Jason smiled, unsure why his throat felt tight. "Would it be all right if I bought you a real cake?" he asked. The girls looked at one another, then at him. One whispered, "Are you someone famous?" He chuckled, caught off guard. "Not really. Just someone who was late for something important." He turned to the waitress, who had been standing nearby in silence. "Bring them whatever cake you have. The biggest one." She nodded, eyes wide. As the girls clapped and began excitedly rearranging napkins for their real celebration, Jason sat down at the table, completely forgetting his schedule, his coffee, and the emails buzzing in his pocket. Something about them, their joy in the face of so little, their quiet resilience, hit something in him he hadn't felt in years. And as he listened to them talk about school, their mom, and the songs they'd practiced for their birthday, he had no idea that this small act of kindness was about to open a door to a past he never knew existed. The cake arrived 15 minutes later, towering with layers of chocolate and whipped cream, adorned with rainbow sprinkles and exactly 7 candles, as if the universe had known the number all along. The girls gasped in unison, their hands covering their mouths, eyes wide with delight and disbelief. Jason watched them closely, taking in every movement, the way one of them reached out timidly to touch the cake as if it might disappear, the way another bounced slightly in her seat trying to contain the excitement that practically shimmered off her skin. The third girl, quieter than the rest, turned to Jason with a look so genuine it made him forget everything else. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice almost trembling. "This is the best birthday ever." The waitress brought over a lighter, and Jason let each girl take turns lighting their own candle, holding his breath as their little hands steadied the flame. When they all finished, they sat together, eyes closed, whispering wishes into the warm space between them. Then, in a chorus, they blew out the candles together, their laughter erupting seconds later, like music that filled every quiet shadow of the café. People at nearby tables smiled, some clapped, and the moment, small and unexpected, became something unforgettable. Jason found himself leaning in, asking questions he didn't usually ask. What were their names? Where did they go to school? What kind of cake did they usually like? Their answers came quickly, layered with the openness only children could offer. "I'm Sophie," said the boldest of the three. "I'm Haley," said the one who had lit the last candle. "And I'm Emma," said the quietest, still holding a fork like it was the most precious thing she owned. They told him about their school, how Haley loved science but hated spelling, how Sophie was the fastest runner in her grade, and how Emma once got a gold star for a picture she drew of her mom holding the moon. As they spoke, Jason noticed how often they mentioned their mother, how she worked at night and slept during the day, how she always made pancakes from scratch when she wasn't too tired, how she sewed their Halloween costumes even when she came home exhausted. There was no bitterness in their voices, only admiration. They didn't speak of a father. Not once. And Jason didn't ask. The cake was nearly gone when he realized he had completely lost track of time. His phone, which he had silenced earlier, buzzed repeatedly in his pocket with calls and messages. But he didn't reach for it. Instead, he asked, "Would you like a ride home?" The girls looked at each other, and Sophie, ever the bold one, nodded. "We live really close. But Mommy said not to walk with strangers." Jason respected that. "Then maybe I could walk with you. Just to make sure you get there safe. You can call me Mr. Jason." They giggled at the formality, but agreed. The walk was short. They chatted the whole way, about their favorite cartoons, about a stray cat that sometimes waited by their door, about the birthday card they had drawn for their mom but hadn't given her yet because they couldn't find an envelope. Jason couldn't remember the last time he had listened so closely, or felt this kind of warmth settle in his chest. When they reached the apartment building, it was clear that it had seen better days. The paint was peeling in spots, and one of the hallway lights was flickering. The girls didn't seem to notice. They bounded up the stairs, and Jason followed more slowly, unsure what he was going to say when their mother opened the door. Part of him thought maybe he'd thank her for raising such incredible daughters. Another part wasn't sure if she'd even want to see him. But when the door swung open, everything inside him stopped. The woman who stood in the doorway wore faded scrubs, her hair pulled back into a tired bun. Her eyes, though framed with exhaustion, were unmistakably the same vibrant blue as the girls. And Jason knew her. Not from a photograph. Not from coincidence. He had known her years ago. Before his career exploded. Before the boardrooms and the private jets. Before everything. "Amber," he said, his voice hoarse. She blinked in disbelief. The girls stood between them, looking back and forth with wide eyes. "Jason," she breathed, stepping forward, her hand against the doorframe as if to steady herself. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. The silence between them buzzed louder than any of the city noise drifting in through the hallway. Emma tugged at Amber's sleeve and whispered, "He bought us cake." Amber's eyes softened. She looked at Jason again, longer this time, and the weight of everything they hadn't said hung heavy in the air. It was clear that nothing about this meeting had been planned, yet it felt like it had been waiting to happen for years. Jason finally stepped back, his mind racing but his voice steady. "They're incredible," he said. "Just like their mother." Amber didn't smile. But she didn't close the door either. Instead, she stepped aside and said, "You'd better come in." The apartment was small but warm, filled with the kind of clutter that only comes from a home with growing children. There were hand-drawn pictures taped to the refrigerator, a stack of books on the coffee table, and toys half-tucked under the worn-out couch. Jason stepped inside slowly, his gaze scanning the space as though trying to absorb the 7 years he had missed all at once. The girls ran ahead, tossing their jackets onto a chair and bouncing around the room as if this reunion between two adults wasn't changing the course of their lives. Amber closed the door behind him, leaning against it for a second longer than necessary. She hadn't expected to see him ever again, and now he was standing in her living room like no time had passed. Except it had. Every minute of those years had been long and heavy. Jason remained near the entrance, unsure if he should sit or speak or leave. He wasn't used to feeling out of place, but in that moment, every carefully built layer of his executive persona felt irrelevant. Amber walked past him and into the small kitchen, where she began making tea without asking if he wanted any. He took that as a sign he was allowed to stay, at least for a few minutes. The girls settled on the couch with a coloring book, whispering excitedly to each other while glancing over at him. He watched them, still stunned by how much they looked like her, and, as he realized now, like him. Amber finally returned with 2 mugs and handed him one without a word. She sat across from him in an old armchair, legs tucked underneath her. Her scrubs looked a size too big, her hair had loose strands falling into her face, and there were dark circles beneath her eyes. But she was still the same woman he had once fallen for. Not glamorous. Not flashy. But strong in a quiet, steady way that had drawn him in before and now pulled at something he hadn't let himself feel in years. He took a sip of the tea before speaking. "I didn't know," he said simply. Amber looked down at her hands. "I know." There was a pause between them, filled with all the things neither knew how to say. "Why didn't you tell me?" Jason asked finally, his voice calm but aching. She didn't look up. "I was going to," she said. "But then. I didn't. I got scared. You had just started your new company, everything was moving fast for you. And I didn't want to be the one to complicate your life." He blinked, struggling to understand. "Amber, they're my children. You had every right to tell me." "I know," she said again, her voice lower now. "But I kept waiting for the right time. Then it got too late. Then I didn't know how anymore." Jason rubbed his hand over his jaw, trying to process it. He looked over at the girls again, still lost in their coloring. "They're amazing," he whispered. Amber smiled faintly. "They are. I'm lucky. They've been my whole world." Her eyes met his. "And I know I made the wrong choice keeping them from you. But I did the best I could." He didn't respond right away. He was still fighting the whirlwind inside him, grief for lost time, anger at being left out, confusion about what to do now. But none of it changed the way his heart had shifted the moment he saw those girls. They were his. That truth had landed with quiet finality, and now it was a part of him. "I want to be in their lives," he said finally. "If you'll let me." Amber didn't answer right away. Instead, she watched him for a long moment. "That's not a decision I can make alone," she said. "You'll have to earn their trust. They've never had a father figure. I've worked hard to protect their hearts." Jason nodded. "Then I'll earn it. However long it takes." She looked down at her tea, then back at him. "You've got a long road ahead, Jason. This isn't a weekend visit situation. They'll have questions. And you'll have to be patient." He met her eyes. "I will be. I promise." The girls looked up just then, as if they knew their names were being spoken in silence. "Can he come again tomorrow?" Sophie asked. Jason and Amber both turned to her. Amber hesitated, then nodded slowly. "If he wants to." Jason smiled, his voice firm. "I do." And just like that, something fragile but real began to form in the room between them, not forgiveness, not yet. But the beginning of something honest, and maybe even something whole. Jason returned the next day, just as he had promised, holding a small paper bag with fresh muffins and a quiet determination that felt heavier than anything he had carried in years. He arrived early, unsure if Amber would even answer the door again, but when it opened and Emma peeked out with a cautious smile, he knew something had shifted. She let him in without calling her sisters, and for a moment, it was just the two of them standing in the small hallway. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with the kind of curiosity only children can hold on to, and asked if he remembered which of the 3 muffins was blueberry, because that one was hers. Jason smiled and told her he hadn't forgotten. The morning passed in quiet, uncertain patterns. The girls took turns showing him their drawings, then dragged him into a lopsided tea party with stuffed animals and plastic cups. At first, he sat stiffly on the floor, unsure how to navigate this world he had missed entirely, but slowly, their laughter softened his edges. Haley made him wear a crown made of construction paper, and when it slipped over his eyes, they all erupted in giggles that echoed through the walls. Amber watched from the kitchen, silently stirring oatmeal, letting herself observe the impossible reality of Jason Carter sitting on her living room floor, being called Sir Muffin King by 3 little girls who had no idea how much he had once meant to her. After breakfast, Amber handed him a backpack and asked if he wanted to walk the girls to school. It was a test, one she hadn't warned him about, but he passed without hesitation. They walked together, Jason holding Haley's hand while Sophie skipped ahead and Emma pointed out cracks in the sidewalk that looked like hearts. When they reached the school gate, Jason crouched down to say goodbye. Haley hugged him without being asked. Sophie gave him a quick high five. But Emma hesitated. Then she reached out, her fingers brushing against his jacket, and whispered, "You came back." He looked her in the eyes and said, "I always will." When he returned to the apartment, Amber was already dressed for work, gathering her things in the narrow hallway. She didn't speak as she zipped her bag, and Jason stood silently until she finally turned to face him. "They like you," she said. "But this isn't going to be simple, Jason. You're a stranger to them, no matter what the truth is." He nodded. "I know. But I want to be more. I want to be their dad." Amber leaned against the doorframe, tiredness pulling at her features. "You can't just step in and fix everything. They don't need fixing. They need stability. And you left without knowing." Her voice wasn't angry, just tired, like someone who had fought too long without relief. Jason swallowed the lump in his throat. "I didn't leave. I didn't even know there was something to stay for." That quieted her. He offered to take the girls every afternoon after school until her night shifts changed. She hesitated, then finally nodded. "If you want to help," she said, "start with the routines. Pick them up. Help with homework. Bedtime stories if they let you. Just be there, every day. Not just when it's convenient." Jason promised he would, not because he had to, but because he couldn't imagine choosing anything else anymore. That week became the first real test. He learned how Sophie hated broccoli and how Emma got nervous in loud rooms. He learned that Haley loved numbers and was afraid of dogs, even small ones. He helped with math worksheets he didn't fully understand and cut out shapes for art projects with fingers clumsy from years of doing nothing domestic. The girls asked questions, some simple, some surprising. "What do you do for work? Do you have pets? Why don't we have the same last name?" And every time, he answered honestly. He didn't know how to be a father yet, but he knew how to tell the truth, and he knew how to show up. So he did, every day. Amber watched from a distance. She didn't interfere, but every time she saw him tying a shoelace or helping with a spilled drink or gently brushing a tangle from Sophie's hair, something inside her softened. She remembered the version of Jason she had once loved, before the money, before the pressure, before life made him someone too big to reach. Now, somehow, this man in her living room was becoming someone real again. One evening, as he helped the girls into their pajamas and tucked Emma into bed, she clung to his sleeve and asked, "Are you going to stay when we're asleep?" Jason looked at her with something breaking in his chest and replied, I'll always stay until you don't need me to anymore. She nodded, satisfied, and closed her eyes. Amber, standing quietly in the hallway, heard it too. And for the first time in a long while, she believed him. By the 5th week, the routine no longer felt borrowed. It had become something deeper, something that belonged to all of them now. Jason no longer needed directions to the school, nor reminders about whose backpack had the green zipper and whose needed to be double-checked for the lunchbox. The girls stopped calling him Mr. Jason and began saying just Jason, sometimes even slipping into Dad when they were sleepy or distracted, though none of them mentioned it when it happened. He didn't point it out either. He held those moments like fragile treasures, too sacred to break by acknowledging them. Each afternoon, he picked them up from school, their hands instantly reaching for his as they ran down the sidewalk with stories tumbling out of their mouths like an avalanche. He listened to all of it, the arguments over crayons, the spelling tests, the playground drama, and remembered a version of himself that once lived only for quarterly earnings reports and acquisition deals. This was messier, slower, more unpredictable. But it made sense in a way nothing else ever had. After school, they would stop for a snack, usually something simple like pretzels or apples, which Jason had learned to slice the right way, and then walk home where homework, dancing, and storytelling blurred together in a rhythm that only children could invent. Amber's shifts remained exhausting, but she had started coming home earlier when she could, entering the apartment to the smell of dinner and the sound of laughter. Sometimes she joined them, sometimes she watched from the doorway, too overwhelmed by the sight of what her life had become to speak. She had built everything with her bare hands and exhausted heart for 7 years, and now, without asking, someone was offering to hold part of that weight. One Thursday night, after the girls had gone to bed, Amber found Jason on the couch reading through a children's book he didn't fully understand. He was trying to memorize the characters' names so he wouldn't get them mixed up again. She sat down beside him and said, "You're really trying." He nodded, not looking up. "They deserve it. You do too." She studied him for a moment, then asked the question she'd been holding for days. "Why are you really here, Jason? Is it guilt? Is it obligation?" He closed the book, finally looking at her. It started with shock. Then guilt. But now, it's just love. "I love them. And I missed you." The words surprised both of them in their honesty. Amber looked away, caught between emotion and fear. "This isn't something you can walk away from, Jason. They'll break if you do. I will too." "I'm not leaving," he said quietly. "Not now. Not ever again." The next day, Jason received an unexpected call at work. It was the school. Emma had gotten into a fight with another student. She had pushed a boy who made fun of her during reading time. Jason dropped everything and arrived at the school faster than he thought possible. When he got to the principal's office, Emma was sitting in a chair too big for her, swinging her legs and holding back tears. Jason crouched down in front of her and asked what happened. She looked up at him and whispered, "He said I didn't have a dad. I told him I do." And then he laughed. Jason felt something burn behind his eyes. He took her hand and looked at the principal, who had already softened. She stood up for herself. "We'll talk at home, but, thank you for calling me." On the way home, Jason didn't scold her. He told her how proud he was that she spoke up. He explained why pushing wasn't the right way, but also that being brave sometimes means telling the truth even when no one believes you. That night, Amber watched them from the kitchen, Emma curled against Jason's side, holding a blanket and listening to him read the story she had picked out herself. It wasn't lost on her how fast things had changed. Or how natural it all looked. When Emma fell asleep, Jason gently lifted her and carried her to her room. Amber followed him down the hall, pausing as he tucked the blanket beneath her chin and kissed her forehead. When they stepped out of the room, Amber didn't speak. She simply took Jason's hand and led him back to the living room. They sat together in silence, no longer needing explanations. The unspoken was enough. What had started as a chance encounter with 3 little girls and a birthday muffin had slowly unraveled every wall she had built. And despite everything, she wasn't scared of the unraveling anymore. She was starting to hope. Jason had always believed in structure. His world was built on precision, meetings scheduled down to the minute, outcomes measured in margins, every move calculated like a game of chess. But life with 3 7-year-old girls had taught him that chaos could be a kind of rhythm too, and that love didn't care much for structure. By the 6th week, he wasn't just visiting their lives. He was woven into them. The girls began drawing pictures with 4 people instead of 3, and every time he saw his likeness sketched in crayon, with 2 big ears or stick arms holding a coffee cup, something inside him softened. His name was no longer an afterthought. It was at the center of their stories now. He had started keeping a drawer in Amber's kitchen filled with snacks he learned the girls liked, organized not by brand but by preference. He knew Haley hated pretzels unless they were shaped like animals, that Emma loved apples but only if he peeled them, and that Sophie insisted every sandwich be cut diagonally, not straight down the middle. He didn't forget. He never missed a detail. And the girls noticed. Trust was no longer something he was reaching for, it was slowly being handed to him, piece by fragile piece. Amber, too, had shifted. She no longer kept her guard raised like armor. She let herself breathe when he was around, sometimes even laughing at his clumsy attempts to fix the leaky faucet or his inability to braid hair correctly. One night, after all 3 girls fell asleep during a movie on the couch, Jason quietly carried them one by one to their beds. Amber followed him down the hallway and paused at Emma's door. When he gently pulled the blanket over her, Amber reached out and touched his arm. It was subtle, brief, but real. Their eyes met in the soft light of the hallway. She whispered, "You're good with them." He smiled and replied, "They make it easy." But beneath the surface of their slowly rebuilding world, something heavier was stirring. Amber had been having migraines for weeks, brushing them off as fatigue, blaming long shifts and missed meals. Jason noticed, of course, but every time he brought it up, she smiled through it, insisting it was nothing. Until one afternoon when she nearly collapsed in the kitchen while stirring soup. Jason caught her just before she hit the ground. The spoon clattered to the floor. The girls watched in stunned silence. He took her to the hospital immediately, heart racing, arms tight around her even as she protested weakly. The waiting room was cold and too white, and Jason sat there with all 3 girls clinging to him, their small bodies curled into his sides. He didn't know what to say, only that he couldn't lose her, not again, not like this. The hours stretched endlessly until a doctor finally emerged, explaining that it was exhaustion, severe dehydration, and stress, but thankfully, nothing more serious. She would recover with rest. Jason let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That night, after Amber was settled at home with a mountain of pillows and a prescription for rest, Jason tucked the girls into their beds and returned to her room. She looked at him from her pillow, her voice hoarse. "I'm sorry. I didn't want you to worry." He sat beside her and took her hand gently in his. "You don't have to carry everything alone anymore," he said. "I'm here. We're in this together now." She looked at him like she wanted to believe it, like she had been holding her world together with threads and was finally considering letting someone help her sew it stronger. In the days that followed, Jason took on more than he ever imagined he could. He balanced business calls with story time, ran board meetings over video while packing school lunches, and answered emails while waiting in the school pickup line. And somehow, it worked. He didn't feel like he was losing control, he felt like he was becoming someone better. Late one evening, Amber watched him from the doorway as he braided Sophie's hair and helped Haley tape stars to her science project. She whispered more to herself than to him, "I never imagined this for us. I thought I'd always do it alone." Jason turned, not with a speech but with a quiet promise in his eyes. "You're not alone anymore." That night, she leaned against him on the couch while the girls slept, her head on his shoulder, her breath finally steady. And for the first time in years, the silence between them wasn't filled with questions. It was filled with peace. Spring crept in slowly that year, like it was afraid to make promises too soon. The mornings were still cold, but flowers began to bloom along the sidewalks, and the light that filtered through the apartment windows in the late afternoon had turned warmer, softer. Jason had begun arriving earlier and staying later. He didn't just pick the girls up from school, he stayed through dinner, bath time, and often long after bedtime stories had been whispered and lights had been dimmed. Amber stopped waiting for him to leave. He became part of the evening in a way that felt natural, like he had always belonged there. One Thursday evening, as Jason sat on the couch helping Haley cut paper stars for her school project, Sophie appeared in the hallway holding a drawing behind her back. "Close your eyes," she said, bouncing on her feet. Jason played along, and when he opened them, she handed him the picture. It was a crayon portrait of 4 stick figures standing in front of a house, each one labeled, Mom, me, Sophie, Emma, and finally, Dad. The word caught in his throat. He looked at Amber, who stood by the kitchen counter pretending to wipe it down even though it was already clean. She didn't say anything, but she didn't look away either. Jason looked back at Sophie and asked, "You drew this?" She nodded. "That's our family." He pulled her into his arms and held her for longer than she expected. Her small arms wrapped around his neck without hesitation. It wasn't long after that when the girls began asking if he would ever move in. They asked it with the innocence of children who hadn't yet learned that adults hesitate with their hearts. Amber heard them, of course. She didn't answer for him, and he didn't answer either. Not yet. Instead, he started doing the little things that made it obvious he already had one foot planted in the home. He bought a second toothbrush. He started keeping a change of clothes in Amber's closet. He took over Sunday breakfasts. He found himself falling into routines that didn't feel temporary. One afternoon, Amber invited him to a parent-teacher conference. It was Emma's. Jason had offered to watch the girls so Amber could go alone, but she surprised him by asking, "Would you come with me?" The teacher greeted them with a kind smile and began talking about Emma's growth, how she'd become more vocal, more confident, how she had drawn a picture of her dad and talked about him with pride. Jason felt the words settle heavily in his chest. Afterward, Amber and he walked back in silence. When they reached the apartment, she turned to him and said, "I didn't expect this." He asked what she meant. "You. Them. Us. I didn't think I'd ever feel this again. Safe." Jason took her hand in his. "Neither did I." They didn't speak about the future out loud, not yet, but the air between them had changed. It wasn't filled with uncertainty anymore, it was filled with possibility. Jason had found himself learning things he never knew he needed to know, like how to braid hair without pulling too hard, how to tell when a story was more important than being on time, how to carry the weight of another person's exhaustion and still smile through it. One evening, Emma asked him where he lived. When he answered truthfully, she looked confused. "But you're here more than there." He didn't have a response. Amber walked into the room just in time to hear and offered a quiet solution. "Maybe one day, he'll live here too." Emma smiled. That would be perfect. Later that night, Jason found himself staring out the window after the girls were asleep. Amber joined him, wrapping herself in a blanket and leaning into his side. "You've become their home," she said. "And mine too, in a way I forgot was possible." He didn't answer right away. He simply pulled her closer and kissed the top of her head. Spring had officially arrived. And with it, something else had bloomed, something tender and strong, like the roots of a life that had taken hold in soil that had once been cracked from too many storms. They hadn't planned any of it. But somehow, it was everything they didn't know they needed. The day Jason officially moved in was quiet, almost anticlimactic. There was no grand announcement, no boxes stacked high in the hallway, no speeches about changes or new beginnings. Instead, it happened on a Saturday morning when the girls woke up to find his coffee mug sitting next to Amber's on the kitchen counter and his shoes neatly placed by the door next to theirs. Sophie noticed first and whispered something to Haley, who squealed and ran to find Emma. Moments later, all three of them were piling into Jason's lap as he sat on the couch tying his shoelaces. "You live here now?" Sophie asked, her eyes wide. Jason looked at Amber, who was leaning against the kitchen doorway, watching with a smile she didn't try to hide anymore. He looked back at them and said, "If that's okay with you." They didn't answer with words, only hugs and the kind of laughter that fills every corner of a home. In the weeks that followed, the house changed in small but significant ways. Jason took over the Sunday grocery runs, making sure to buy all the right snacks even when he had to text Amber 3 times from the store to confirm which cereal Emma liked and which one Sophie thought was too crunchy. He helped with school drop-offs and began to know the names of the other parents. The teachers waved to him. The girls called him for help with science fair projects, for advice on how to fix broken shoelaces, and to read just one more story before bed. He never said no. Not once. Amber returned to a day schedule and finally started sleeping full nights again. With Jason there, the evenings weren't just easier, they were lighter. They cooked dinner together, fell into routines that felt like rituals, and laughed more than either of them ever had in their separate lives. Every once in a while, Amber would catch Jason staring at the girls when they weren't looking, his expression filled with wonder, like he still couldn't believe they were his. Sometimes she caught herself doing the same. One afternoon, Emma brought home a permission slip for a school event. There was a small section labeled "Emergency Contact," and beneath that, another line that asked for parent/guardian name. Without hesitating, she wrote Jason Carter, in neat, careful letters. When Amber saw it later that evening, she didn't say anything. She just smiled, folded the paper, and tucked it into her purse. A month later, the girls' school hosted a spring concert. They had been rehearsing for weeks, whispering about their song choices, designing matching headbands with glitter and ribbons. Jason sat in the front row beside Amber, holding her hand tightly while the girls climbed onto the small stage in their coordinated outfits. When the music started, they didn't sing right away. Instead, Sophie stepped up to the microphone and said, "We want to dedicate this song to someone really special. He's new in our family, but he already makes it feel like the best one in the world." Then they sang. It wasn't perfectly in tune, and they forgot some of the words, but it was perfect. After the show, as they all walked home together under a soft pink sky, Amber leaned her head against Jason's shoulder and whispered, "I'm glad you stopped for coffee that day." He kissed her forehead and said, "So am I." At home, they tucked the girls into bed, each one asking if he would still be there in the morning. He answered the same way he always did now, without hesitation. Always. Later that night, Amber sat with him on the couch, her legs tucked beneath her, a quiet smile on her face. "Do you regret anything?" she asked. Jason looked at her for a long time before answering. "Only the time I lost. But not this. Not now." She reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. The house was silent except for the occasional sound of the girls turning in their beds. It wasn't the life either of them had imagined. It was better. Because it was real, earned, and built out of love that had survived distance, fear, and the unexpected. In the soft hum of their shared silence, surrounded by the warmth of a family they never planned for, they understood something neither had dared hope for: this wasn't a second chance. It was the only chance that had ever mattered. I believe the ending of this story is the kind that lingers in your heart long after the last words are read. It's not about a perfect resolution or a fairy tale finale, it's about healing, redemption, and the quiet power of showing up when it matters most. Jason didn't just find his daughters, he found a version of himself he never thought existed. Amber didn't just forgive, she allowed love to return in a way that felt earned. And the girls, who started the story with a shared muffin and invisible candles, ended it surrounded by a family that finally felt whole. That kind of ending isn't just happy, it's deserved. And that makes it beautiful.
He built his empire with code, vision, and a heart that trusted the wrong woman. But when betrayal struck from the one he called wife, he didn't crumble. He made a choice, one that would change everything. Have you ever discovered the person you love isn't who they claim to be? Not just lies, but theft, deception, and a secret that could shatter your soul? When Adrian Ross, tech billionaire and reclusive genius, caught his wife in a web of lies, he didn't scream. He walked away, straight into an arrangement that was never meant to lead to love. She was quiet, untouched by luxury, and chosen for convenience. But beneath her silence was a truth no one expected. She was a virgin, and she was carrying his children. Now tell me, when a heart once broken starts beating again, would you trust it? As we begin, I would like to know where in the world you are watching from. Hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on beautiful stories as this you're about to watch. Now let's begin. The night air bit sharply across Sofia Delgado's bare shoulders as she stood alone on the balcony of her high-rise. The glow of Crescent City twinkled beneath her like a lie dressed in gold. Just days ago, that very balcony had been her favorite place, where whispered dreams became shared laughter, where promises felt like truth. Now, it was the stage of her deepest heartbreak. Julian had stood beside her here, spoken words meant to comfort, words that turned out to be nothing more than veils for betrayal. It wasn't just infidelity, it was corruption, theft, manipulation, and the worst part? He'd done it all with a smile. She found the photo first, a careless slip tucked beneath a stack of company paperwork. Then, the unfamiliar scent clinging to his coat. And then, the confrontation. His defense crumbled quickly, more from guilt than denial. He'd stolen company funds to bribe one of Crescent City's underground power players, Lucio Vasari, a man no one crossed and walked away unscathed. Julian had traded Sofia's trust for protection from the city's wolves, and as his lies collapsed, Sofia felt her own foundation crack. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply stood there, the pain crystallizing into resolve. When the knock came, she expected maybe a neighbor. Instead, it was her father, Carlos Delgado, his face lined with age and unspoken truths. "Sofia," he said gently, stepping in with careful hesitation. "You don't have to go through this alone." She turned from the city's glare. "You knew about him, didn't you?" Her voice didn't shake. It cut. Carlos sighed, lowering his gaze. "I knew what Julian was tangled in. I thought I could contain it, protect you from it. I was wrong." The confession sliced deeper than she anticipated. "So, I was just leverage," she said quietly. "Just another pawn in your business war." Carlos didn't argue, didn't deny. He only stepped forward and placed a hand on her shoulder. "I've failed you," he said with quiet pain. "But there's a way forward, one I believe gives us a fighting chance." Sofia didn't flinch. "I'm listening." The Ross building loomed like a glass temple in the heart of Crescent City. Steel, stone, and ambition. Its corridors echoed with power, its boardroom colder than its walls. Sofia walked in wearing a slate-gray pantsuit, hair pinned back, face unreadable. She was here to negotiate. Her future. At the head of the room stood Michael Ross, billionaire, strategist, reformer, and now, possibly, her husband. Their handshake was professional, brief, charged. Michael had a reputation, detached, calculating, effective. But the moment his eyes locked with Sofia's, something shifted. Curiosity flickered behind his usual reserve. Carlos cleared his throat and began the presentation, detailing the Vasari threat, the company's vulnerable position, and the proposed alliance. Every sentence dripped with consequence. Sofia listened. She already knew the stakes. When Carlos finished, Michael took over. His voice was smooth but direct. "So this marriage, it's less a vow and more an agreement. Do you understand that, Miss Delgado?" Sophia met his gaze without blinking. "Perfectly." He nodded and pushed a contract forward. "It outlines a union in 7 days. Ownership, full partnership, appearances maintained." Sophia read the lines quickly. No hidden clauses, just bold terms. She signed. Their fingers brushed as she returned the pen. Neither moved. Something unspoken passed between them. Michael stood. "You'll move into the guest wing of my home. I expect discretion and transparency." "I expect the same," she replied. He nodded once. Sophia turned, her heels clicking against the floor as she left. Michael watched her go, his expression unreadable. But in that fleeting second before the door closed behind her, he smiled. Rain tapped gently against the city's windows. Inside a private courthouse chamber, Sophia stood across from Michael in a silver dress that clung like determination. He wore a navy suit, collar crisp, tie absent. They exchanged formal words, signed documents, and slipped on rings made of quiet resolve. The judge pronounced them married. No kiss, no applause, just an unspoken promise, survival. Sophia woke before dawn. Her heart thudded beneath the blanket, nerves tight like piano wire. She turned to find Michael still asleep beside her, his breathing slow, his expression softer. He didn't look like a ruthless CEO in sleep. He looked like a man who had lost things too. Sophia dressed silently and walked into the kitchen. The Delgado Estate's kitchen was massive, impersonal, but the coffee she made was familiar, grounding. Michael entered, sleeves rolled, hair tousled. He poured himself a cup and leaned beside her on the counter. "No regrets yet?" he asked, breaking the silence. Sophia met his eyes. "Too early to say." Michael chuckled softly. "Fair." They sat at the breakfast table, the clinking of silverware the only sound, until Sophia set down her fork. "This marriage," she began, "was built on necessity. But I don't want it to become something we resent." Michael looked thoughtful. "Then let's give it structure, boundaries, honesty." She nodded. "And space." "Agreed," he said, "except on matters of protection. If you're in danger, I won't keep my distance." Sophia looked away quickly. That one sentence landed too deep. Outside, the morning fog was lifting, and somewhere between the silence, something fragile stirred. "Hello, my beautiful family. Would you agree to marry someone for protection or business if it meant saving your family's legacy? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story's got you hooked, hit that like button, share with someone who believes in love born from pain, and subscribe for more stories that challenge the heart. Now, let's continue. The first week of marriage between Sophia Delgado and Michael Ross passed not in celebration, but in quiet coordination. Though the papers were signed and public statements issued, their connection remained unspoken. Their nights were silent, their meals civil, their words measured. But everything was shifting, subtly, unmistakably. Michael noticed the way Sophia stood by the window late at night, tracing the skyline with her eyes as if looking for answers in the glass and lights. Sophia noticed how Michael's hands always tightened around his coffee mug when news of Crescent City's financial unrest came on screen. Neither spoke of fear, but both felt it. On a crisp Tuesday morning, Sophia sat across from Michael in a dining space large enough to host dignitaries. Between them, a modest breakfast of eggs and toast rested untouched. Michael cleared his throat. "I've been reviewing the joint reports from both companies. The Vasari situation is pressing faster than expected." Sophia set down her fork. "So, what do we do?" He didn't blink. "We speed up negotiations, and we present the image of unity. Not just on paper." Sophia narrowed her eyes. "Meaning?" He leaned back slightly. "Public appearances, interviews, perhaps even attending the Westbridge Gala, together." The mention of the city's largest social event made Sophia pause. It was less a party and more a political chessboard. Every power player would be there. "I'll consider it," she said finally. Michael smiled faintly. "Thank you." Sophia stood before the full-length mirror, wrapped in a silk robe. Her mind wandered as she traced the ring on her finger. This alliance had felt cold at first, a move on the corporate battlefield. But lately, Michael's small gestures lingered. A coat draped over her shoulders without words. His voice, low and warm, asking if she'd eaten. His silence beside her in the garden, comforting instead of awkward. She turned as a knock echoed on her door. Michael stood outside, holding a tablet. "I thought you'd want to see the finalized Vasari asset map," he said. Sophia nodded, stepped aside. He entered. They stood beside each other at her desk, reviewing the document. "Lucio controls more than we realized," Sophia murmured. "Even our shipping channels." Michael's brow furrowed. "Then we find the cracks in his control. Every empire has them." She turned to him. "You're not what I expected." He smiled slightly. "Neither are you." For a moment, the air between them thickened. She could smell the faint cologne on his collar, feel the heat from his skin. Michael didn't move, but Sophia did. She reached out, gently touching his hand on the desk. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was trust, fragile and earned. The grand ballroom of the Westbridge Hotel shimmered with chandeliers and politics. Sophia, in an emerald green evening gown, turned heads the moment she entered on Michael's arm. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and Michael looked at her like she was the only person in the room. He leaned in. "You wear power well." She smirked. "I've had practice." They danced once, only once, but it was enough to ignite murmurs among Crescent City's elite. Later, as they stood beside the marble fountain, Sophia whispered, "Why me?" Michael didn't answer immediately. He stared into the rippling water. "Because when everything else fell apart—" "You didn't," he said finally. Sophia's breath caught. And then, in front of the cameras, under the bright lights, Michael kissed her, softly, deliberately. It wasn't for show. It was a question, one she didn't yet have an answer for. Back at the estate, Sophia changed into her nightwear and sat at her vanity. A soft knock. She opened the door to find Michael again. No tablet this time. No briefcase. Just him. He stepped inside slowly. "I didn't come to pressure you," he said. "I just wanted you to know. I meant that kiss." Sophia looked at him. For the first time, she didn't see the CEO. She saw the man. "I know," she said. And then, her voice trembling slightly, "Would you stay? Just for a while?" He stepped closer, brushed his thumb across her cheek. "If that's what you want." It was. He didn't undress. He didn't touch her beyond the comfort of his hand in hers. They lay on top of the covers, fully clothed, the silence between them warmer than any conversation had been. That night, they slept, not as strangers, but not yet as lovers. Sophia woke before Michael. She turned carefully to look at him. His features, always so composed, were soft in sleep. His brow relaxed, his lips slightly parted. She watched the slow rise and fall of his chest. Something flickered in her chest. Something dangerous, not fear, hope. She slid out of bed and walked to the window. The morning light touched her face. She took a slow breath. Behind her, Michael stirred. "Morning," he murmured, voice gravelly. Sophia turned to face him. "Morning," she replied, smiling gently. They were no longer acting. The lines had begun to blur. 3 weeks into their union, Sophia and Michael no longer needed to pretend. Their rhythm had changed. They ate together, walked the halls together, sat beside each other in meetings and whispered observations only they could understand. The cold alliance had thawed into something warmer, more fragile, more dangerous. At night, the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It felt full, like a breath waiting to be released. And with each passing day, the glances grew longer, the conversations deeper, and the space between them smaller. The winter sun dipped low over the rose bushes, casting long golden light through leafless branches. Sophia knelt among the soil, bare fingers brushing away dead petals. Michael approached quietly, sleeves rolled, tie discarded. "You garden now?" he asked, stopping just short of her. Sophia smiled faintly. "Sometimes things bloom better when they're cut back." He knelt beside her. "You sound like my old therapist." She chuckled. Then he was probably right. Michael watched her closely. The sunlight clung to her skin, lighting up her features in a way he'd never noticed before. Or perhaps he had. He just hadn't allowed himself to look. "You're not afraid anymore," he said suddenly. Sophia's fingers stilled. "No. I've already lived through the worst of it." Their eyes met. Michael reached over, gently brushing dirt from her cheek. His hand lingered longer than necessary. Sophia didn't pull away. He leaned in, slow, deliberate. Their lips touched with quiet reverence, not hunger. It was not a conquest. It was surrender. The door closed behind them without a word. Michael pressed Sophia gently against the wall, hands on either side of her, forehead resting against hers. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. She shook her head slowly. "Then I won't." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and she melted into him. Fingers tangled in his shirt. Her pulse raced beneath his touch. He lifted her easily, carrying her to the bed. The covers were cool. Their bodies were warm. Michael peeled away each layer of fabric like a secret. He traced every line of her skin with reverence, like someone reading verses in a forgotten language. Sophia's breath caught when he touched her lower abdomen, his fingers hesitating. "You're shaking," he said softly. "I've never," she whispered, voice almost lost to the quiet. Michael froze. He looked at her, really looked. "You've never?" Sophia turned her face to the side, embarrassed. Michael pressed a kiss to her shoulder. "Then we do this your way." He shifted, letting her guide him. Every movement was gentle, every breath shared. When their bodies joined, it was slow and deliberate. A rhythm of trust, not urgency. Sophia gasped softly as he filled her for the first time. Pain and pleasure mingled. Tears welled in her eyes, not from hurt, but from how deeply she felt him. Michael moved with patience, with awe, like she was the most precious thing he'd ever touched. Their hands stayed clasped. Their eyes never broke. And when Sophia cried out his name, it wasn't from pleasure alone, it was release. Afterward, they didn't speak. They lay tangled together, heartbeats still echoing. Michael rested his hand over her belly. "You're incredible," he whispered. Sophia closed her eyes, held against the thrum of his voice. "So are you." The clinic was private, discreet, and far from the city's chaos. Sophia sat nervously beside Michael, her hands clasped tight. Dr. Helene entered with a soft smile. "We ran your tests, Ms. Ross." Michael reached for her hand, lacing their fingers. "You're healthy. Everything looks strong." Sophia's brow furrowed. "So what's the result?" Dr. Helene pulled out the ultrasound image and turned it to them. "You're pregnant," she said gently. "With triplets." The room went still. Sophia's lips parted. "Triplets?" Michael blinked. "Are you sure?" "Positive." Sophia laughed, half in shock, half in disbelief. I didn't think this would happen. Not so soon. Not with this." Michael squeezed her hand. "You did it." "No," she whispered, eyes brimming. "We did." They sat on the velvet couch in a silence laced with awe. Michael poured them each a glass of sparkling water. "You don't have to decide anything tonight." "I already have," Sophia said, looking into his eyes. "They're mine. They're ours." He looked at her, more moved than he could show. "You're not alone, Sophia. Not anymore." Sophia leaned into him, head resting on his chest. "I believe you," she whispered. And for the first time since the contract was signed, there was no tension between them. No pretense. Only the quiet peace of belonging. Pregnancy had softened the sharp edges of Sophia's world, but peace never lingered long in Crescent City, not when power shifted so easily behind closed doors. As Michael and Sophia prepared for a future they never expected, shadows from the past stirred again. Whispers in the business district, surveillance vehicles parked too long on side streets, phone calls that ended in silence. Lucio Vasari might have lost a pawn in Julian Price, but he had not vanished. And with Sophia carrying the heir to two empires, she was no longer just a businesswoman. She had become a target. The office lights flickered as the last of the staff cleared out. Sophia sat at the conference table reviewing expansion proposals. Her hand absent-mindedly cradled her stomach. Michael entered with a file in hand, but his eyes were elsewhere, on her. "You should be resting," he said gently. "I will," she replied, not looking up. "Just finishing this one thing." He sat beside her, his knee brushing hers. Security detail intercepted a car outside the west entrance. No license plates. Driver disappeared before we reached him. Sophia froze. "Is this Lucio again?" Michael hesitated before nodding. "We'll move to the lake house tomorrow," he said, "just until things cool down." Sophia didn't argue. She just exhaled slowly, the weight of danger pressing against the fragile joy she'd been trying to hold on to. Michael reached over and took her hand. "I won't let anything happen to you, or to them." She met his eyes. "I believe you." Nestled miles from Crescent City, The lake estate offered seclusion and silence. Towering pines lined the drive. The water stretched endlessly behind the house, glinting under the afternoon sun. Sophia stepped onto the porch, inhaling the crisp air. It smelled like pine needles, earth, and safety. Inside, Michael watched her through the kitchen window. She looked different here, less guarded, almost weightless. That night, they lit a fire and curled up beneath a single blanket on the living room floor. Sophia's head rested against Michael's chest, their bodies molded to each other. She spoke softly. "I never thought I'd have this." "This?" he asked. She gestured around them. "Safety, peace. Someone who sees me without asking me to be less." Michael's voice was low, his words sincere. "You've never had to be less. You just never had someone who knew how to hold all of you." Sophia looked up at him. The firelight danced across his face. "And you think you can?" "I already am," he said. Their lips met again, slow, unhurried. There was no performance, no pressure, only them. The calm broke with the sound of shattering glass. Sophia bolted upright. Michael was already out of bed, gun in hand, eyes sharp. The security alarm wailed. A guard's voice crackled through the intercom. Intruders on the south perimeter, 3 men, armed. Michael spun to Sophia. "Closet, now." She didn't argue. She rushed into the walk-in closet, where a small reinforced door had been installed. Behind it, a panic room waited. Michael helped her inside. "Stay here. No matter what you hear." "Michael," he kissed her. "Trust me." The door sealed. Sophia heard his footsteps fade down the hall. The sounds that followed chilled her blood. Shouts, gunfire, breaking wood. Her hand clutched her stomach protectively. Time lost meaning inside the vault. Minutes stretched like hours. Her mind raced with images she couldn't control. Then, a voice. Michael Ross's secured, came through the intercom. A new voice. Cold, confident. "We have what we came for." Her heart dropped. She waited, then pressed the emergency alert. A shrill signal transmitted directly to the private security headquarters. By the time backup arrived, the intruders had fled. Blood trailed across the hardwood floors. Bullet holes marred the walls. Sophia emerged from the panic room barefoot and trembling. "Where is he?" she demanded. An agent led her into the master bedroom. Michael lay on the bed, his shirt bloodied, shoulder bandaged. He was awake. Barely. Sophia dropped beside him. "You're here," she whispered, voice breaking. "I told you," he rasped, gripping her hand weakly. "No one touches what's mine." Tears fell freely. "You're bleeding." "Only a scratch." "You liar." Michael grinned through the pain. "Maybe a deep scratch." Sophia pressed her forehead to his. "Don't scare me like that again." "I won't," he promised. "Not if I can help it." They sat there, hands locked, blood on his sleeve and firelight flickering against their skin. And through the storm, Sophia felt something more powerful than fear. She felt the strength of love that had been tested and held. Michael's shoulder had required surgery. The bullet had missed bone but tore through muscle. Now, resting in the VIP recovery wing, he kept his phone beside him, fingers twitching whenever it buzzed. Sophia entered with a wrapped container of soup and a look that said she'd had no sleep. "Doctor said you can go home in 2 days." Michael looked up. "And you?" "I'm staying, as long as it takes." She fed him slowly, each spoonful followed by quiet smiles and teasing remarks. Between bites, he asked, "Do you regret marrying me?" Sophia paused, then leaned in. "No, because marrying you saved more than just the company." He studied her. "What else did it save?" "My heart," she whispered, "and my future. Hello, beautiful souls. I know you are enjoying this story, and I see you smiling, crying, and in deep emotions. Please, in case you haven't subscribed here yet, do well to hit the subscribe button. Have you ever faced real fear with someone by your side, only to realize that's what real love feels like? Share your story in the comments. If this chapter left you breathless, like this video, subscribe to our channel, and let's keep exploring the kind of love that survives fire, bullets, and betrayal. Crisis had a way of clearing the fog. In the days that followed the lake house attack, Sophia never left Michael's side. The man who had once seemed made of numbers and logic now lay bruised, vulnerable, and yet somehow stronger than ever. Each scar he bore reminded her of one truth: He didn't fight for business. He fought for her. The windows were open to the soft chirp of morning. Michael sat upright, arms still in a sling. Sophia, wearing one of his dress shirts like a robe, brought in fresh juice and her favorite novel. "I didn't know you read," Michael teased. "I do," she replied, climbing onto the bed beside him. "Especially to people who get shot in the name of love." He smirked, shaking his head. "Dramatic. You're lucky I'm dramatic." She kissed his cheek before settling beside him, opening the book. Her voice, soft and steady, filled the room. Michael closed his eyes, resting as she read aloud. The words didn't matter. It was the melody of her voice, the warmth of her skin beside his, the calm he hadn't felt in years. They sat outside, wrapped in a blanket, overlooking the distant skyline. Sophia leaned into him as Michael nursed his tea with his good hand. "What happens next?" she asked. "Security will triple. We move you to the main penthouse. I'll cut ties with every middleman who ever dealt with Lucio." Sophia shook her head. "Not the company. Us." Michael turned to her, eyes sharp with clarity. "That depends. Do you still want to do this? Not the alliance, not the appearances. This." She answered by taking his hand and placing it gently on her belly. Their children, rested beneath her heartbeat. "I want to be yours," she whispered. "For real, not just in name." Michael's throat tightened. "Then I'm already yours." He leaned down and kissed her, not with urgency, but with certainty. It was no longer a performance. It was a vow. The ultrasound room was quiet, save for the faint whir of the machine. Sophia lay back, Michael beside her, eyes locked on the screen. The technician smiled. "There they are." 3 tiny figures danced across the monitor, clustered like stars. Michael's fingers dug softly into Sophia's palm. "I still can't believe it," she whispered. "Neither can I." The technician turned the volume up. 3 distinct heartbeats echoed in the room. Sophia's eyes welled up. Michael brought her hand to his lips. "We're building a whole new world," he murmured. Back in the boardroom, Sophia was different. No longer the woman chasing justice or fleeing heartbreak. She was calm, unshakable. A future mother and a CEO standing tall in heels and resilience. She addressed the shareholders with grace and resolve. "Delgado Tech will no longer negotiate with shadows. Our legacy won't be dictated by fear. It will be built by integrity and protected by truth." Thunderous applause erupted across the room. Michael stood at the back, proud and silent. The woman he'd married for strategy had become the one he loved without limit. Days later, Sophia sat cross-legged in the middle of a sun-drenched room, surrounded by swatches of wallpaper and baby furniture catalogs. Michael entered holding a tray of lemonade. "Don't laugh," he said, "but I actually have opinions about cribs now." She laughed, the sound light and rich. "Who are you? And what did you do with Michael Ross?" He knelt beside her, picking up a paint sample. "I'm the man who's about to be a father to 3 very lucky little humans." Sophia leaned against him. "They're lucky because of you." Michael kissed her temple. "They're lucky because of us." They picked the wallpaper together, neutral tones with soft patterns. As they laughed and debated between rocking chairs and mobiles, Sophia felt it, peace. Not because the threats were gone, but because love had taken root in the middle of the storm. Lying in bed, Sophia's body curled around the soft swell of her stomach. Michael whispered into the darkness. "I wasn't sure I could do this," he said. "Let someone in again. Trust them with everything." She reached for him under the sheets. "You didn't have to be sure. You just had to choose." "I choose you," he said. Every time, every heartbeat. They kissed under the stillness of night. Outside, the city lights blinked faintly in the distance. Inside, there was nothing faint about the way he touched her. They made love slowly, with reverence. Michael worshipped her curves, her breath, her sighs. Sophia guided him with tenderness, gasping as his mouth explored every inch with care. There were no masks between them. Only skin. Only truth. When it ended, they lay together in breathless peace. Sophia, glowing. Michael, healed. For a time, it seemed the storm had passed. But the most dangerous enemies never knock. They slipped through cracks, smiling. Lucio Vasari hadn't disappeared. He had been waiting, watching, biding his time. And now, with Michael vulnerable and Sophia preparing for motherhood, he decided to strike one final time. Not with bullets, with contracts, with blackmail, and with betrayal. Michael sat at the head of the table, pale but steady, his shoulders still wrapped beneath his suit. Sophia stood beside him, calm and composed, but her pulse raced beneath the surface. Across from them sat Anton Reyes, Lucio's proxy, a man with an icy smile and a folder thick with leverage. "This," Anton said, sliding the folder forward, "contains proof that Delgado Tech's offshore accounts were accessed through unauthorized protocols." Sophia stiffened. Fabricated. Anton only smiled wider. "Perhaps, but convincing enough for an SEC probe. Unless, of course, we reach a more productive resolution." Michael leaned forward. "What do you want?" Anton tapped the folder. "Ownership. Majority stake in both companies. Or we let the investigation run its course." Sophia met Michael's eyes. A silent conversation passed between them. Then she turned to Anton. "You'll get nothing," she said. Anton smirked. "Then enjoy the fallout." He stood and left the room with the grace of someone convinced he'd already won. Michael exhaled slowly. "It's starting again." "No," Sophia said firmly. "It ends with us." Their legal team gathered. Advisors reviewed every threat. Sophia paced while Michael, still recovering, sketched out timelines and digital forensics. They worked through the night, Sophia leading the charge. Every board member had questions. Some were fearful, others angry. Sophia answered each one with clarity and force. "This company was built with integrity," she declared, "and I will not hand it over to a man who traffics fear for power." Michael watched her from across the room, eyes filled with awe. He had seen power before, but never like this. She wasn't just fighting back. She was leading. Lucio watched the board meeting broadcast from a private feed, eyes narrowing. "She's grown teeth," he muttered. Anton stood beside him. "We underestimated her." Lucio lit a cigar. "Everyone's brave until you take what matters most." His eyes drifted to a photograph on the screen, Sophia, cradling her stomach. "Let's see how she fights with a broken heart." Security had been doubled, but someone always knew how to disappear into the system. The black SUV that trailed her for miles remained unnoticed. Until the impact. Sophia's car was forced onto the shoulder, tires screeching, metal crunching. Her driver slammed the brakes. She hit the seat hard, hand clutching her stomach. The door ripped open. Masked men reached in. She screamed once, sharp, primal, but within seconds headlights appeared from the opposite direction. Michael's convoy. Armed guards jumped out, shouting warnings. Gunfire erupted. Sophia's bodyguards shielded her as she was pulled into Michael's car. He was already out, pistol drawn, blood pounding in his ears. Shots flew. The attackers retreated. One man dropped, hit in the leg. The others fled into the night. Michael dropped beside her, searching her face. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. Sophia blinked. I think I'm okay. The babies, we're going to the hospital, now." He scooped her up and carried her into the back seat, voice low but firm. "Drive, fast." Sophia lay hooked to monitors. The doctor's voice was calm but firm. "No internal bleeding, no sign of distress. The triplets are safe. But you'll need bed rest." "Absolute." Michael sat at her side, gripping her hand like a lifeline. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "This is my fault." Sophia shook her head. "This is his fault, and I'm going to end it." Lucio Vasari never saw it coming. A city-wide corporate raid, led by Sophia, sanctioned by the district court, backed by hard evidence, gathered in secret by Michael's cyber team and handed over to federal agents. Hidden shell companies, fraudulent invoices, bribes documented in crystal clarity. Vasari's name was everywhere. When the news broke, he was halfway to his jet. But it was too late. Police surrounded the runway. He was arrested without a shot fired. City billionaire Lucio Vasari has been formally charged with over 20 counts of financial fraud, extortion, and attempted assault. Michael and Sophia watched from their living room. He turned to her. "You did this," he said softly. "No," she replied. "We did." Michael brushed a kiss across her forehead. "And now?" Sophia smiled. "Now we rest, and wait, and love." Time passed, but it didn't dull the fire. It refined it. Weeks became months. Threats faded. Wounds healed. And in the quiet that followed the storm, a miracle unfolded. Sophia stood barefoot in the nursery, one hand on her back, the other resting on her stomach. The morning sun poured through gauzy curtains, warming the pale blue walls decorated with soft golden stars. Cribs stood side by side, 3 of them, each identical, each waiting. She let out a slow breath as Michael entered quietly behind her, his shirt wrinkled from another night of interrupted sleep. "You couldn't rest?" he asked gently. Sophia turned and smiled. "They're moving. A lot, like they know it's almost time." Michael walked over and knelt before her, pressing his ear to her belly. "Hey," he whispered, "take it easy on your mother. She's done enough saving the world this year." Sophia laughed, brushing his hair back. "They like your voice, you know." "I like theirs," he replied, placing his palm across her belly as one tiny kick answered back. The world felt still inside the operating room. Machines beeped. Lights glowed. Sophia lay on the table, calm but bracing herself. Michael stood beside her in surgical scrubs, holding her hand tightly. "Ready?" the doctor asked. Sophia nodded. Michael kissed her forehead. "You're the strongest woman I've ever known." Then, cries. Not 1, not 2, 3. The room filled with life. Michael blinked back tears as the nurses called out, "Baby A, girl. Baby B, boy. Baby C, boy." Each cry sounded like music. Each breath reminded them that love, real love, doesn't just survive battles. It multiplies. Sophia sat propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant. The triplets were wrapped in matching blankets, resting peacefully in her arms. Michael stood near the window, silent for a moment, then turned with glassy eyes. "They're perfect," he said. Sophia looked down at them. "We made them, from the pieces of a broken past." Michael sat beside her, gently cradling their daughter. This is the only legacy I care about." She leaned against him. "And the only empire I want to build." The mansion had changed, not in structure, but in sound. Laughter echoed down the hallways. The scent of baby lotion, warm bread, and fresh coffee filled the air. In the backyard, a birthday picnic was underway. Friends, family, staff who had once feared for their jobs now shared in the joy. Sophia, barefoot in the grass, helped the toddlers chase bubbles. Their daughter Liana waddled with determination while her brothers, Caleb and Mateo, tumbled after her, giggling. Michael watched from the porch, a rare grin lighting up his face. "You okay?" Carlos Delgado asked, joining him with 2 drinks. Michael nodded. "Better than okay." Carlos studied his face. "I was wrong about you." Michael glanced over. "About what?" "I thought you were just business. Cold calculation. But I see now. You're exactly what she needed." Michael looked at Sophia and their children. "She saved me. Not the other way around." The twins had fallen asleep side by side. Liana snored gently on Sophia's chest. Michael entered with a blanket and tucked it around her. "You ever think about how we got here?" he asked softly. Sophia nodded. "Every night." He sat beside her. "I remember the first day I saw you, powerful, guarded. I had no idea you'd be the mother of my children, and I had no idea love could look like this," she whispered. Michael kissed her slowly. "It looks like home." They held each other until the moonlight replaced the glow of the crib lamps. "They say love comes when you least expect it. But sometimes love comes when you're at your lowest, when you've lost everything, when trust feels impossible, when your past is still bleeding. That's when the right person walks in, not to fix you, but to remind you, you were never broken. You are always whole. You just needed someone who saw it. And now, Sofia Delgado is more than a CEO, more than a survivor. She's a wife, a mother, a woman who chose to love again, and in doing so, built a future stronger than any empire. As for Michael Ross, he stopped running, because for the first time, he had something worth standing still for. Have you ever rebuilt your life after heartbreak and found something better than what you lost? This story wasn't just about betrayal. It was about becoming, about healing, about the beauty of choosing love again, no matter how many times life tried to steal it from you. If Sophia and Michael's story moved you, tell us in the comments what moment touched your heart the most. And don't forget, like this video, if you believe love can grow through pain, share this story with someone who needs a little hope today. Subscribe to Love and Twilights for more soul-deep stories every single week, because somewhere out there, someone still believes in love like this. Maybe it's you. Maybe it starts right now.